All right, let's go ahead and start. We're going to pick up where we left off last week here in just a second, but to do that, let's kind of roll back into it. Let me tell you what we're going to do. We've been trying to plow through and get a lot of stuff done. As it was pointed out last week, I was not going to get all 7 level lines in, even though I was trying to speed up, but I was leaving stuff out. And so what we'll do is we'll continue this in the next rotation. And so we'll slow down a little bit tonight, make sure we're squared away with what we've got, pick up again, and then and we'll keep adding to it. So let's go back and somebody read our key verse of this series, Romans 15:13. Romans 15:13. Read that out loud for us, and we'll kind of start there and just kind of wade our way back through it and catch up to where we're at.
Now may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that you will abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit.
And I share with you that is a verse that has been just resonating with me. We've diagrammed it a number of ways, but ultimately is that idea that God gives us hope, fills us with joy and peace through that hope then we extend out into the culture. That's why we're here. For all the reasons that we've been talking about, we live in a day and age where that needs to happen. And the hard part about that is, I mean, these are not necessarily easy things to learn, but one of the things that's happened, and one of the things that happens in churches is that we get real good at church culture, we're not real good at navigating culture. And so as a result, church in some ways has lost the culture because we have taken church life and we've kind of made it like going to a mall, or now we're just shopping online. We just look for what we like, and we lock into church, but we don't put a big emphasis on being called to church. That God has called me to a place to put my life. God has called me to a place to use my gifts. God has called me to a place to grow and to share my giftedness with others so that together we might be stronger, which is what the church is supposed to be. And so, because we've gotten away from that, then we come to topics like what we've been talking about on Sunday morning or even on Wednesday evening. And I got a note from a pastor friend of mine who says, he says, your series right now on Wednesday and Sunday are the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do to grow a church. And he's right. It's kind of like the anti-church topic, right? Because, you basically are calling out, in some ways, some of the mainstream philosophy of the culture that's predominant today. And so what happens? Well, they don't want to hear that garbage. They just want to go somewhere else because they want to go where you hear what you want to hear. And so, so I've taken some good-natured kidding about it. But on the flip side of that, too, I've also got some guys that have listened in on what we're doing and are incredibly bothered and challenged by it at the same time. And so there's some other conversations going on, which is good. And then Sunday morning, when we talk about it, again, we're going to be talking about, I'm going to teach you some hand motions, but basically you do this. Okay? And we go fins to the left and fins to the right, and you're the only bait in town. We're going to do that Sunday morning a little bit. That'll be our call to worship. But we're going to... But we're going to look at that, but we're going to start landing this series with some very practical, real ways. Now, okay, so now that we've talked about this, what do we need to know? And this will obviously continue on into the next Wednesday night series, but we're probably within 2 or 3 weeks of landing this series. Really, it's 2 weeks, but it's probably 3 weeks as I was looking at my notes, just because there's just a lot there still, but we'll see what happens with it. Because all of it becomes important. All of it matters, because while we've been talking about Marxism and socialism on Sunday morning, obviously that lends to what we're talking about on Wednesday evening. And I shared with you a few weeks ago in our previous series, I share it with you again, you are immortal until you complete the work that God has for you. And so I say that to say this: don't be afraid. Don't let the things of the world and the culture scare you. Because you are here for a reason, and as long as you're doing what God wants you to do, you are immortal. Nothing's going to happen bad to you as far as killing you until you're done. And when you're done, He'll call you home. So the goal is then to be obedient. Well, what does obedience look like? Well, part of it is back up here at Romans 15:13. God gives us hope. We need to be the people that dispense hope into the culture. The bad news for followers is, because we do have a sense of the way the culture has slides and has slid off the rails a little bit, we kind of get caught up in that, and it's real easy to be woe is me. And I get impatient or anxious around followers that get there and share it but never get out of it. I mean, it's one thing to say, I don't know what to do and I'm scared and I think it's overwhelming and it's just bad, it's just bad. Okay, and so then what do you do about that? What is your next step? What are you doing tomorrow to make it better? Because again, it doesn't take a degree from any major university to figure out it's bad. That's easy. The hard part is doing something about it. The analogy in the backdrop is great. Again, remember Jaws? Remember the movie, the original? Cheap Brody? He wants to close the beaches down. Why? Because there's a big fish out there that's eating people. But they don't want him to close the beaches. He knows what needs to be done. He knows what he needs to do. You're rooting for this guy because he cares. He's the only one that comes up with a plan at all of what to do about this fish. But no one else seems to care because they're all worried about other things. They're worried about our businesses being open. We're worried about the tourism trade. We're worried about this. We're worried about this. And so you feel like sometimes you're Cheap Brody. And there's a feeding frenzy going on out there. And so that is a tough place for us to be sometimes. And so the church, I am still convinced, is still the best plan, is the A plan for reaching the culture. It's not some of these other organizations that have tried to claim that higher ground footage. And we have organizations out there everywhere that say, and they tout themselves as, we are the pace setters, we are the trend setters, we are the model. I got news for you. They're building their models on things that don't last. And as much as we admire them, and I admire them too. I mean, I like some of the stuff they're doing. I get sucked into the awe, the shock, and the wonder of it all. But at the end of the day, we do come down to a basic issue of what are you doing with truth, and are you handling that well, and are you doing what you're supposed to do, which is what? Putting hope back into the culture, because you're immortal. As long as you're being obedient, you're untouchable. You'll be fine. And we have to remember that, and that means that there's going to be times it's tough. There's going to be times that we have to stand strong, but you do have to know. You have to be informed. Ignorance is ignorance. Bliss, no, but it's ignorance. And so we're trying to kind of at least lay some things out, because if you don't have those conversations here, where are you going to have the conversations? Where are we going to look at it? Where can we talk about it? Even someone this evening came in and said, hey, I just want you to know, my boss listens to what you do, watches what you're reading, and he is convinced that other pastors ought to be talking about these kinds of things. Good for you. You're different than everybody else. Yeah. Happy day. Anyway, but you do it because somebody's got to be those voices. Someone has to do it. And so we're looking at the level lines. Okay? Go back to week 1. When God is separated from government, judgment follows. We talked about that a little bit. I think all of us can agree upon the fact that there has been a push over the last whatever many years to kind of move God kind of out of the public square a little bit. People get nervous about that, and they're a lot more vocal about that. That's not an accident. And I'm going to say this, and I'm not going to hedge it. Well, I am. I'm going to say it. This isn't all bad. I know that there are some proponents out there that say the darkest day in American education was when we quit praying in public schools. And I know what the intent is there, but I had some teachers growing up that I remember that had no business praying. And so for me, as a student growing up in that era, when we kind of quit doing it, I was a lot better off when we went to silent meditation. We took the authority away from some of the teachers that had been praying for the first few years that I remember the prayers going, holy mackerel, what is that? I mean, we were praying to all sorts of things, and we were praying to trees, and we were praying to Mother Earth, and we were praying to all, but I mean, this time, and so, I mean, it wasn't the end, because, I always contended that, as long as I was there, you could never take prayer out of public school, because any test, I was never prepared. And so tests were always a spiritual experience for me. I was praying my socks off the day of the test. You can't take prayer out of public school. That's the only way I got through. Grace of God and prayer. So, and I think some of you fall in that same category as I look around the room. But so again, but understanding though, what is bad though is that movement that as we've been talking about, in Nazi Germany, what began happening is that it was pushed out, and very much on purpose, to take God out of the conversation. And that's really what we're talking about here. If God's not allowed in the conversation, if God's marginalized, that's when you're in trouble. And so for each of these, we're asking the question, are we above, or we are a nation that is over God? Or are we willing to be a nation that serves under God, that lives under God? And so again, you just have to figure out where that level line is there. We talked about the economy. It's always the economy. The economy drives everything. An economy bothers us, and it affects us, and it impacts us. Anybody gotten gas this week? Oh, yeah. For some people, getting gas is an emotional experience. I've gotten gas twice this week, and I've just stopped. Just because I thought, well, surely the truck's got to be full. Oh, no, you can't fill up a truck. I mean, if you got a truck, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. It's costing a fortune now to fill up your vehicle. I'm going to come back to our board and ask for a raise. I need more gas. But it's always the economy, right? Always the economy. The economy is going to drive everything. And as I told you, in Nazi Germany, Hitler's rise to power came because he fixed the economy. And as Churchill said, if Hitler would have just died, he'd have gone down as one of the greatest leaders of all time. But he didn't die because it was part of a bigger plan. And sadly, he was the smartest guy in the room. And he knew what he was doing, and it was very calculated. And he decided to keep going from there. And so, when it comes to our economies, personal, national, are we reflecting godly values? Or are we reflecting the attitude of a nation that's just over God? That which is legal might also be evil. It's that whole idea that just because it's the law doesn't necessarily mean it's right. And again, Hitler was able to marginalize an entire population of people, the Jews, and eventually had laws put on the books where the Jews were no longer seen as people. And if they were no longer seen as people, they could be exterminated, like you would a rabid animal, because they were bad for the culture, bad for Germany. And so, although it was the law and it was legal, putting people into train cars and taking them to death camps, there's nothing good about that. Just because it was legal doesn't make it right. And so that allows us now to take a look at our laws. And I said to you last week, so should you care about the next Supreme Court justice? And you should as a follower. You should. Now, you have very little to do with who's going to be put on the Supreme Court. That train left the station on Election Day in November. But that's why presidential elections are important. That's why congressional elections are important. See, we think they're not important until something happens that really does change the trajectory of the culture. And so we live in an era where, as we talked about last week for a few minutes, the idea is, for the group that's not in power to get as many judges as they can in, and if they can't get enough judges in, then they want to start packing the courts and changing the rules. Because whoever has power wants to change the rules to make it work their way so they don't lose power. It's all about holding on to power. Which is why the Trump presidency is a presidency that no matter who's in office, you're always going to hear about, or you're going to hear about for years and years and years and years, because he put 3 judges in. His legacy, his impact, may be a lot of things, And he may or may not be done yet. Who knows? We'll find out here, pretty soon, I have a feeling. And things will start hyping up again, and and it becomes, party time, I guess. But the ongoing legacy is going to be what happens in that Supreme Court setting. Don't kid yourself. And what those judges do, because as I mentioned last week, because judges tend to change after they have a lifetime appointment, because that's job security. And what you think you're getting, sometimes you're not getting. And you just never know for sure. And you go back and you think about judges and who appointed them, and you say, really? They appointed them? Yeah, they did. And so that has a lot to do with how our laws are going to be interpreted and what that looks like. And we talked about the Constitution a little bit. And then last week we ended up on this one, and we were flying by the time we got here, that propaganda can change a nation. So that's where we went. So before we pick back up with that, and that's where we're going to pick back up, questions or comments about any of that all the way down to here? Thoughts? No thoughts? Semi-thoughts? Remember again, I'm not saying American culture is Nazi Germany. That's not what we said. We said we just did this disclaimer the first week. I suggested to you that in Nazi Germany, the things that were happening in Nazi Germany culturally were setting the tone for Hitler's rise to power. These are the things that were setting the tone for Hitler's rise to power. So that's why you have to become a little bit well-versed in them. That's why you have to be able to keep up with the news of the day, as we were just talking about. That's why you have to find those sources that you can trust. And the good news for us in this day and age is that there are unlimited sources to go to. The bad news is there are unlimited sources to go to. The most trusted name in news is no longer the most trusted name in news. At one time, that was CBS and Walter Cronkite. And he managed to do that for a long time. But no one knew till after he was well retired that Walter Cronkite was very much a left-leaning progressive. But no one knew that about him because he managed, in the news organization he was a part of, to be able to walk a middle line and to try to be a fair voice and a fair shake for a number of years until the climate began to change and shift. Well, that's what you would expect, right? You want someone that's going to call balls and strikes. That all changed a little bit in the Vietnam War. So much so that the President of the United States says, if I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost the country. That was Lyndon Johnson. And so you begin to understand and see how all of these things really do have such an impact in our life, and it ripples into the life of the church from the standpoint that everybody that walks in the church doors is affected or impacted by this. Nobody turns off their political filters, as we're finding out in the series that we're in right now on Sunday morning, or at least I get to find out. And they react to it based upon what they perceive to be or believe to be truth in the culture that we've grown up in or that we're involved in. And that's why we look at it. So again, anything about that before we kind of step away from it? Comments, thoughts that you wanted to inject, but you didn't want to interrupt me because you knew we were way behind. But see, now we have time. We're going to slow up and take a deep breath.
You just had a comment about
David wants to get to number 5 tonight.
Didn't say long wind. Long wind.
If you hadn't interrupted me, I would have already asked my question. You made a comment about, when it just on the point of, picking who the Supreme Court justice would be, we have nothing to do with, well, not that we don't, but, it seems like our voice isn't even loud enough to even get to that point that we would have any impact on who's going to make that decision. So, to me, it's almost like that is where people make their minds up, like, no one's going to hear my voice anyway, so why am I going to do it?
And it's easy to get there, right? Because again, you feel like it doesn't matter. if you don't show up and vote next week when we're supposed to be taking the vote, what does it matter, right? Or if you talk to your next door neighbor, I mean, I have some people in my life that we would always talk about elections. One in particular was a family member. And our conversation always the night before election was just the same. Hey, you're going to the polls tomorrow, right? Yes, I am too, to cancel your vote. Because again, we already knew going in we were going to vote against each other. We were going to vote, we were going to go opposite down the ticket. Could we talk about it, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to cancel your vote. And I expect you to go cancel mine. Because again, that is our job. That is our responsibility. Votes matter. And the last couple of presidential elections should have reminded us of that. Because again, those counts, going all the way back to the days of the old Hangin' Chad, which was not a singing group, but it was something that happened here in Florida. It should have reminded us, that okay, it really does. I mean, it's it's a little bit overwhelming to think that an American election could come down to that. Those close votes. So it does matter. And I think that Christians ought to be active. I think we ought to be very vocal. I think we ought to be busy. Because again, it is. Many people take that idea that says, it doesn't matter. But you have limited weapons and you have limited things that you fight with. And I say weapons in the best sense of the world, but you have a vote. You have a voice. And you have the opportunity to speak in and be a part. And again, the mayor here will tell you, a lot of people, you don't hear about it from anybody until they got a problem. Right?
No one ever called and said he did a good
Yeah, no one ever called and say thank you, did they? No. We don't call our local leaders to say, hey, great job, appreciate it, prayed for you this morning. What we do is we call and say, I got a complaint, or I got a situation, or I need some information. There's always somebody wanting something. Any given night, you're going to see something happens down there, but you think about the decisions are made just in Winter Springs alone. How many people sit in that room to hear the conversations when we're making decisions?
Same ones and usually a handful.
Yeah. Less than 100, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But now Winter Springs is a pretty good sized place. But the decision being made for a city, we don't even pay attention to. Because again, why? We're busy and, it doesn't really matter and someone else is out there to take care of it. And I just think that we as followers, this isn't subversive, but if we as followers ever just got mobilized, we could take over the world. But we just don't because it just takes too much effort. We're just too tired, too busy. Shoot, I got to go home and watch TV. I don't have time for this. I got to go watch the news.
And we're too lazy to find the information because I watched my family in Tennessee there, and I don't remember what the issue was, but something they were very passionate about, that they did not want their congressperson to vote. And they are on the phones calling all their friends saying, here's the number to call, let them hear your voice, because most people don't even call their congressperson to say, I want you to vote no. But if it was an issue that our church was very passionate about and all of us called and they are like, man, all of a sudden I'm getting 200 calls to vote no on this. They want to be reelected.
Yeah.
They do listen to that, and I think we never tap into that. I've tried to do better, at least too, with our governor. If I'm, man, I know you're in a tough place. I am praying for you today. I'm praying for wisdom for you, good job today. I love the choices that you're making. You're representing me on this one, but how many of us have ever done that in our lifetime? And, well, I don't know how to do it. Well, it's Google, anymore. It's easy.
Well, yeah.
But
we say we don't know how to do it, but we can order Domino's.
Right. Or spend 20 minutes.
It is the same principle, right?
on Facebook.
Hey, what I would like is this, and I'll pay you to do this. Try that with your congressman. But yeah, sure.
Something I care about, I want you to vote yes because you represent me. Or I want you to vote no.
I'm not going to ask for a show of hands if we actually know our congressman. I'm not going to ask anybody to reveal that or whether they do or don't.
We also live in a country where we're free to do that.
We can't,
We're
yes.
free to protest our government.
Yeah.
Unlike, you see what's going on in Russia.
Right.
There's thousands of
And we don't take advantage of it.
Yeah.
people protesting a war that they don't even want to be involved in. So,
It's a huge deal. We ought to take advantage of it. Our voice really does matter. It does. And so for us as followers, we have to know that that's okay. We've heard a lot of times before, politics don't belong in the church. I got emailed this past week, and probably some of them will watch this evening. Hey, you're bringing politics in the pulpit. You're bringing politics in the pulpit. I haven't told you how to vote. I can tell you to vote for. Yet? No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I wouldn't even tell you what show to watch a minute ago. You know, I mean, I'm not going to do that. But you know, but again, because what did I say Sunday morning? At least in one of the services, you know, we hear through our filters, right? You hear through the filter you came in the door with, and it is so difficult to crack through that filter. But our filters can make us crazy if we're not careful. Especially if our filter is not built on or doesn't have a basis in solid biblical truth. And that's hard. That's hard to do. And it gets very, very confusing because, again, the voices in our culture tend to be louder than the voices that we listen to that are spiritual. And so we constantly are fighting that.
I think also it's like when going back to like America is sheltered. And America, like, we, especially nowadays, even me, like, we haven't gone through anything like what's going on in the world around us. It's like, we're soft, to put it, you know, even, I heard someone say about the church in America is soft. You know, like, because we haven't, like, if you think about what goes on in Africa, like in the killing fields that they have, where they're literally, because they're Christian, they're killing them by the thousands and thousands. Or like in Ethiopia right now, you don't hear about it, but there's a war going on there. So, and then, you know, you have Ukraine and everything. It's like, we've been, I mean, how long has it been since there's even been a conflict on American soil? Except for, you know, 9/11, which that was pretty big, but I mean, a major conflict, like a war, it's been, you know, nobody in this room,
January 6th.
even their grandparents, even people's grandparents in this room are crazy.
If you didn't hear that online, Ian said January 6th. We go back to January 6th. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who don't go to church anymore. There's a lot of people who want to tell my kid, oh no, the economy or these are all because of this reason. Total lies. Like the things that they are telling us are like, oh mom and dad, you're wrong about this. I'm like, no, we've been here on the earth longer than you. And from history you've seen, like, this is what happens when this happens, this is what happens when that happens. And just even the battle for truth. You know, it's like it's hard because it's so subtle, you don't know that it's happening, it's in their ear, and until sometimes they've gone too far.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the people right now, so many people that need help and they don't know where to go. But those that figure out where to come, I mean, you know, like the Sharing Center is a Christian-based company. It is. It's been that way for 36 years. And people are flocking there. I mean, daily, you got them coming like crazy. I need rent money. I need, you know, can you help me with my light bill? I'm out of groceries. I don't know where to go. I don't have a bed to sleep in. But they're coming there. And they call you and ask questions. And it's like a lady talked to me yesterday and I said, okay. She says, well, I have furniture to donate. And can you help me? I said, well, we can't get to you today or tomorrow, but I can give you something. I said, or if you have someone in your church, because she was pushed, like I got 2 days to move. I says, well, do you have somebody in your church? Maybe you could call the church office or post something for somebody at the church. They'll see it and say, oh, I'll take their furniture. I don't go to church. But you're calling a Christian-based company and asking them for help as to what do I do and where do I go? Can you pick up my stuff? That's the kind of mindset that is happening right now. And you're wondering, do you realize where you're walking in at? You know, this is holy ground. And you're walking in and asking for help, but yet still, I don't go to church and I don't believe that.
Well, again, I really do believe we have a ton of freedom. We've never been pushed. I mean, we get upset when Facebook kills our live stream. You know, I mean, we get upset about that. You know, we feel oppressed. Ain't nothing. But they've been doing that to us, by the way, every week. If you haven't been watching us online on Facebook, that's been happening on a regular basis. And so, I mean, and that's, and so you just deal with it. I mean, it's just part of it. But that's not tough. That's not tough. And so, I think, the good news is post-pandemic, culture shifts, things like that. I think it's a great opportunity for us to be what I would call a pneumonaut. I've used that phrase with you before. You think of it as an astronaut. We all know what that is, someone who's going to explore the stars. A pneumonaut, pneuma is the Greek word for spirit. And so if you're going to be a pneumonaut, you're going to be someone who is guided by the Spirit into those places that God has called you. I think the call of Christ is to be a pneumonaut in this day's world. I think it's a big deal. I think it's important. And that's why these conversations are important. Let me go back and wrap up what we started last week where I said propaganda can change a nation. Propaganda is information, but not information that's based on truth. Publicity usually tends to be true. Propaganda doesn't have to be. Now, again, if you've been watching the news at all, depending on what channel you watch and who you're listening to, but Russia, in Russia right now, you hear those news reports that come out of Russia. Well, from a Russian standpoint, the official message of what's going on in the Ukraine is that Russians are eliminating, they're denazifying the Ukraine. And according to Russia media, they haven't bombed any hospitals. They're not hitting civilian neighborhoods. And so it becomes as simple as, yes, we are, no, we're not. What we're doing is this. That's propaganda. Jeff, the sky is blue. No, the sky is red. It's red. It has to be. I just tweeted it. That's propaganda. Now again, and if you buy it, and there's always someone who's going to buy it. Jeff Dixon said the sky was red. Holy mackerel. Well, he must know. He's Christian. Well, I could be dumb.
No.
So I mean,
You're long-winded.
But I asked the question and I rolled it out there. Think of what Hitler could have done if he used today's media to gain followers. See, Hitler's rise to power came in a day and age long before any of the social media outlets were there. But what if Hitler would have had access to what we have today? What would that rise have looked like? What would that influence have looked like? What might that have been? And again, I know we're playing, who, what, when, where. But at the end of the day, he knew that propaganda was needed to prepare a nation to change. And so he constantly just kept saying the message over and over and over and over and over and over again. That's how social activist groups work today. You take a vocal minority and minority groups that are activist groups often will take right out of Hitler's playbook of how to use propaganda. And one of the strategies is to say it loud enough and often enough and long enough till people are just exhausted by what you're saying and just decide, I am just sick of fighting this fight. I'm sick of having this conversation. I'm sick of dealing with this. I just don't want to hear it anymore. I'm over it. I'm fed up with it. Click, we quit listening. Boom, we turn off the broadcast. We quit reading. We quit responding. And guess who wins? And that doesn't happen by accident. I was going to say this last week and I didn't, and I'm not going to say it tonight more than this sentence. But the driving force after the AIDS epidemic began to emerge, and it first came out that AIDS was primarily being transferred among a homosexual community, you realize that there were advocates in that community that pulled Hitler's playbook out and strategically began writing the script that would change the narrative and change the conversation in our culture that has yielded to the rise of the LGBTQ community. Because as a percentage, as a group, it's not large. But as a group of influence, it is huge. And the founders and the authors of the script of how to do it did it very much on purpose. That is historical fact. That is truth. If you want to catch me offline and email me, I'll give you their names and I'll give you the publications. And if you want to track them down yourself, you can do it. If you want to fight that fight, or if you have someone who wants to fight that fight, I'll be happy to provide you that information and say, go with God. I just gave you just a bit of truth. That's the truth. Now, I'm somebody that thinks to myself, when I hear that story, I'm like, dadgum. They played the game very well. Because I told you last week, the framer of the issue always wins. Because when you don't frame the issue, you're always catching up trying to come up with an alternate plan or an alternate way of saying it. And one of the things that's happened is, at least in Christian circles, is we as message deliverers got lazy. Because why? The church was always accepted. We lived in a Christian nation. Everybody loves Jesus and nobody doesn't dislike God. And then we come a way and we walk through the streets and we walk into our churches and we walk up and down the street and we are convinced that everyone votes the same way we vote. They think about things the same way we think about them. That their families are just like our families and they don't have any problems that we don't have. And it's a royal mess when you start peeling back the layers on it. And then what we've done is, instead of being comfortable enough in this community of faith to, not just this one, but I mean just church overall, is we became so poor at delivering our message that we became known for what we're against instead of what we're for. There's a lot of things that I can't accept and bless, but I tolerate everything. I have to. Because I can't burn bridges that I might have to cross one day. Why? Because what was my job? My job is to take the hope that I've been given and reach into the culture of the world around me. And that's with family, that's with friends, that's with church members, that's with whoever. And we've had folks that have come in, they've gone out, and they come in, they go out. And there's a variety of things that they bring with them to the plate. But I want you to know that, you peel back the layer on most of our lives. I mean, somewhere back there, if you open up our closets are a mess. You ever listen to the old radio show, Fibber, McGee, and Molly? Old time radio show. If you ever listen to classic radio, the running joke is you never want to open the closet. Because in the closet, it would just be the sound effects guy just going crazy with stuff. It sounded like the whole world was falling out of the closet, right? Don't open that closet! And it sounds like the place is falling apart. It was just a running gag that they always did. But, the truth of the matter is, I work real hard to keep my closet door shut. So do you. And I know that because I know some of you. I know your families. I know what you've been through. I know the stuff that, about you and, stuff about me. And, we don't talk about it a whole lot. But at the end of the day, you should know that you're loved. And you should know you're safe. And that people care. But propaganda can change anything, including a nation. And we live in a day and age where, in our nation too, propaganda is used all the time. It is a constant force that is out there, where there's constantly propaganda that's going on and on and on and on, and people are trying to frame the issue, and then you're trying to catch up. And to be honest with you, issues get framed so fast, they jump into the news cycle. By the time that we collectively as followers go, "Oh, this is something we need to react to," sometimes it's just gone before we ever get there. It's just happened, moved on, is now mainstream, and you just kind of keep going. And so we spend a lot of time just running down the road. A few years ago, 1,000 years ago, I wrote a book. You can't get it anymore. But the first book I wrote a chapter in there called Crouching Tiger, Hidden Church. And I talked about the fact that the church kind of is crouching and hiding because they were afraid that the culture was coming after it, and never realized that the culture just quit looking at us. See, for years I always heard, you gotta be safe, and the church needs to do this, and the church needs to do this because the world's really cracking in on us. Because The world quit looking at us a long time ago. Why? They don't think we have any impact. We've been so poor at delivering our message that they don't care. And I got news for you. The way you fight back against propaganda is with truth. I promise you, someone's going to listen to what I said about the LGBTQ community, and they're going to write me, and they're going to be pushing at me on that one, and somebody is going to get nasty. But I'm right. I mean, you don't have to like it. I don't like it. I'll give them props for figuring out how to do it. I mean, if you want to drive an issue and you want to find who the master of propaganda was, I guess if you're going to go back to find Hitler. He figured out how to sway a nation. That doesn't make it right. God's not at the heart of it. But it is reality, and it is what it was. Because it's never it is what it is. It's always it is what it was. And so, with that being said, we get to the end of this series, and we'll pick up with some more level lines and kind of think through some things, and we'll play with it. But understand, don't be afraid, though. Be smart, because you are in the battle. You're in the game. And sometimes it's like being in the Royal Rumble. If you're a wrestling fan, you know what I'm talking about. In the Royal Rumble, every 90 seconds, another wrestler comes out of the dressing room and jumps into the ring. And so at any given time, there could be 30 people in the ring. And to be eliminated, they have to throw you out of the ring and over the top rope. But as long as you're in the ring, you're in the game. And it seems like every 30 seconds there's someone else coming down the ramp, jumping in and getting in the way. But that's okay. Because we're still in the ring. We haven't gone on the top rope. And we're not going to. Let's pray. God, we thank you that you have allowed us to be in the Rumble. It's good. It's good for us. Because to do it, we need to be strong, and we need to be wise, and we need to be close to you. Because our strength doesn't come from something we create, it does come from you. And so God, help us to be those followers in a world that need to hear hope and love and see joy and see what it really means to do relationship right and see what it means to connect with the world and make a difference in the world and meet needs. And Lord, help us to be people who aren't afraid of that responsibility, but are willing to step in and be agents of change and to shape the culture around us in such a powerful way that if we were not there, the chasm that would be left would be so deep that people would have seen and understood just how powerful you are. God, we want to be that kind of force in the world. And so Lord, help us to learn to do that. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right.